What's up, guys and gals? Welcome back to the Nerdcastle for the next episode of our Q&A, the series where you and I hang out for a little while on Saturdays and or Sundays whenever I decide to get the video out. In all honesty, it's whenever I decide to just do a little bit of editing and like clicky and just like make it happen. We're going to hang out for a little while and I'm going to answer the questions that you've submitted through the Nerdcastle. This week, I think we've got some pretty good ones. I'm going to have to stretch them out a little bit though because I think we had less questions, but I think I can make them more content dense. Like I can just expand it out like I normally do with things that I should probably only take like 10 seconds on. I'm going to turn this into like a full hour affair. No, I'm just messing with you. Either way, let's get started with some questions because that's what you're here for. Wanadina asks, hey, Splattercat, Elder Scrolls or Fallout, and why? I pondered that one, but actually the answer came to me pretty quickly. It was actually really simple. I'm going to go with the Elder Scrolls. In all honesty, I love Fallout 1 and 2, and I love it's one of my favorite games of all time. It's one of my favorite settings of all time. I think that Fallout is super awesome. Unfortunately, I think that Bethesda just is not as experienced with it. They don't follow the timeline properly. They've messed around with the lore too much, and I just really don't feel like Bethesda does a good job when it comes to fleshing out the universe of Fallout. They make a good game, like you get to wander around and do post-apocalyptic stuff, but one of the big draws for me with Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 was watching how the world developed as you got further and further away from the initial cataclysm. Now, in Fallout 4, Fallout 3, like, you do still come out of the vault, and the setting is the same, and you've got, like, a cast of unique characters, but at the same time, something about the lore just feels off to me. It feels less cared about. It feels less sought after. And so anyways, I'm gonna go with Elder Scrolls, because with Elder Scrolls, I feel like they do put in that effort to really solidify the lore. They go all out. There's books all over the place. There's people that are willing to talk about the history of the last 100 years in every game. Like, it's really awesome with Elder Scrolls, how they get things mashed out. I also feel just like the assembly of the game is better with Elder Scrolls, and that makes sense to me because Bethesda's a company they've been making Elder Scrolls now for going on like what, 20 years. I mean, the first game came out a long time ago. I think it was what, Elder Scrolls Arenas or something. Like, it was way back in the day. But like, they've been making Elder Scrolls content for a very long time, and in fact, all of their fame, all of their money, all of their everything is based around that series. The only reason that they could ever acquire bigger IPs like Fallout is because they did so well with Skyrim. And so I still think they need another couple years and another couple titles to really get into the role of things with Fallout. They're doing an okay job, but really, I really like New Vegas better than I liked 3. Fallout 4, I think in terms of video game quality, is very good, but it still doesn't feel like a Fallout game to me. It feels like a post-apocalyptic game made by somebody that watched Fallout and might have the IP, or like may have watched an LP on the old Fallouts, and may have like a rough idea, but at the same time, it just doesn't gel. It doesn't feel quite as good as the one did by Obsidian, and while that one had loads and loads of bugs, when I played the Obsidian title, New Vegas, I felt like they actually had a strong appreciation for the things that happened in Fallout 1, 2, and they were actually trying to bring the universe together into a big coherent piece rather than, you know, a bunch of standalone games that really don't have anything to do with each other. So anyways, I think I'd go with the Elder Scrolls when it comes down to just like the games that Bethesda produces. But if you include Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, the Interplay produced titles, I would probably go with Fallout just because Fallout 1 and 2 are such, you know, unarguable classic PC games that it's very difficult not to side with them versus just about anything else in an overall video game combat. Helios FRS asks, question, if you had to restart the channel from scratch or rebrand, what would you brand it around? You know, in all honesty, that's a tough question because a lot of the niches are filled nowadays on YouTube. It's very difficult to start a channel up anymore, and it was already difficult when I started. But restarting right now, I think you definitely have to have like a goal. You definitely have to have some kind of like polish and editing. Honestly, I'd probably just make a goofy mess around channel. Something like you would see from, I mean, any number of channels. I'm not going to name names right now. But anyways, I'd make kind of a goofy, well-edited, streamlined channel where I just do like little 3-minute videos. More than likely, I'd probably focus, a while back, I like tested something called an Indie Shindig, which is actually like a 3-minute review that I did kind of like a zero punctuation type thing. And I had like little animations and little like PNGs. And, you know, like random little cutouts and things to make it funny, little backgrounds and stuff. And it took probably about 4 or 5 days to put together like the 3-minute review, just all the editing that needed to be done, all the balancing and whatnot. And honestly, it didn't debut well here. Like, it got like very few views, even compared to like my weekly indie newcomers, because I think people don't come here for that type of content. But I would probably try and do something that's a little bit more skillful, because I think what really hurts the channel right now is that my stuff is unedited. And if it was 2007, I could get away with that a lot more successfully. I mean, look how well it worked out for the Rad Brad. I mean, he was the first one on the scene when it came to unedited content, or one of the first anyways. I mean, obviously there were people before him who came from the Something Awful forums and stuff like that, the very early LPs, but when it comes to video content, he benefited greatly by being the first one on the scene, and that's one of the reasons that today he can still make unedited content and nobody questions it, is because he's kind of an elder god now. I would probably focus more on doing something like what Yahtzee does, or, you know, just like really editing things together. And yeah, I played the game for an hour, but here's a 6-minute video with the highlights and me just making one-liners that were pre-written with post-commentary, stuff like that. If I didn't do that, I'd probably focus mostly on Mount & Blade content, Mount & Blade Bannerlord. The reason I don't focus on it heavily here is because it's one of my favorite games ever, and one of the big things that happens is when you force yourself to work on something for like years at a time. Like our last Mount & Blade series got to like 120 episodes, which means that I was working on it for the greater part of an entire year. Like, well, the lesser part of an entire year, but you get my point. 4 to 5 months I was working on that series, especially once it was tapering off near the end and there was a couple of videos that, you know, it took a couple days per video or whatever. What I find is when I stretch something out like that and I turn it into like a forced habit that I've got to get into, it kind of ruins the experience for me. And so anyways, the reason I don't debut Bannerlord and stuff like, the reason I don't do more Mount & Blade content is just because I want to keep it for me. Like, there's got to be something that's separate from the channel that's just like mine, you know what I mean? Like, I already put Warhammer on the channel. I already put lots of things on the channel that I do enjoy. I've already done the Warband series that one time too, and so anyways, I keep it for myself right now, but I'd probably rebrand around Warband content and mod content or something like that, run like 3 campaigns at a time. Like, I would have one, you know, that was a Clash of Kings, I would have one that was Flores, and I would have one of this other one, all running at the same time doing different stuff. Make sure the mods had different content, but at the same time, it's all Mount & Blade, so I mean, you know what you're getting out. But that's probably the 2 ideas that I would go with. Derek Carpenter asks, hey, Splat, when you record games, do you record the game and your voice audio separate or together? Separate. I've always done it separate, actually. The first couple, when I first started YouTubing, and I did a couple of test videos just to get a feel for, like, the whole process of what I was doing, I did them both through fraps. Like, I had it capture the microphone, and then I had to do the other stuff. I didn't like it, though, because that meant at the beginning of every single video, at the beginning of every series, I had to sit there and I had to fiddle with sound levels. I had to get to the first cutscene, and I had to make sure, like, the sounds was okay. It just didn't work out that way, and the easiest way to do it is I use a program called Audacity now to capture my microphone, and then I'll record with fraps, or I'll record with Bandicam, or whatever it is, and I'll just get the video stuff. I'll sync it up in post, and then from there, that allows me to adjust levels on either the video or on my vocals as need be, so that I don't end up with one thing being louder or one thing being quieter as time goes along, because a lot of games have a large variance in between like their quietest moments and their loudest moments. And so when you record everything on one capture, so you're getting voice and video at the same time, the problem you're going to run into is that because of that variance, you might sound balance for a quiet part of the game, but then you end up at a part of the game where there's lots of shooting and running and screaming and horror stuff happening and like throbbing music in the background, and it's easier to be able to edit that up and down in post than it is to look at the entire video and be like, well, you can't really hear my voice from 12 minutes to 15 minutes. I wonder if people will notice. And so anyways, I did a couple of test videos when I first started out, and I really didn't like the way it came out with the vocal audio mixing in with the tracks, and so that's when I started capturing things separate. Now it's way easier if you've got like dual screens. Like my setup now is so much more sophisticated than it was when I first started out. I used to have to alt-tab out to like check my timers and all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And now I've just got a bunch of monitors. Each one has like the one thing that I need on it, and I can just kind of look around and be like, got it, got it, got it. And then I also have another computer down here that I can run into the monitors. I got a laptop. I basically have more sophistication than I need at this point, but that's because I always err on the side of complex versus simple, because I never know how many meters and knobs and things I'm going to need on the screen for any given project. So I capture them separately. That's the long story short. Britannia Gamer asks, do you read any internet cartoonists such as XKCD, SMBC, or The Oatmeal? In general, no, but there is one webcomic that I've followed since I was in high school called The Noob. I followed that since probably, God, I followed that. They're still making it too, like every single, I think it's every Monday they put out a new one. And it's basically the story of a character. It's one of the first comics I ever saw that tried to do this too. I know nowadays comics that are set inside of a fantasy world or inside of an MMO world are very, very common because of World of Warcraft and whatnot. But this comic was being made back in like the Ultima Online days. And so it still references a lot of those old MMO things that don't exist anymore, and I like that about it. It's nostalgic. But I've been reading The Noob for a really, really long time. That's like the one that every couple months I always go back and I'll catch up on it and I'll follow the storylines. I like it a lot, and it was very novel in its time when I first found it in 2002 or 2000, I don't even know. I found it a long, long time ago. It was kind of a niche thing where it's like somebody made a comic about a character inside of an online game, and nowadays there's dozens of those things because World of Warcraft got super popular and it introduced the greater population to MMOs. But back in those days it was a very, very novel concept, and I've always felt like it was a little bit of a sin that they never got the credit they deserved for being one of those early comics that was really doing something that now is very, very common. But then again, that's artistic life. do something original, 10 years later something else popularizes it, and then you get overshadowed by the people that do it and kind of, I don't know, refine it and make it much more user-friendly, I guess. Either way, I like the Noob. You should check it out. I try to give them as much publicity as I can whenever somebody asks. I occasionally come across an XKCD that I like. Some of them require a bit too much thought, though. I'm old school like that, where when I was a kid, I used to read out of the funny papers on the Sunday newspaper or whatever. I know people don't have newspapers anymore, right? Nobody reads a newspaper anymore, but we had the newspaper every morning when I was a kid, and I would read the funny papers, and then I would read the political section, and then I would read, you know, maybe sports section. I liked reading the paper. It was a big deal. My dad did, too. And so anyways, I was raised to read the paper every single day. And so XKCD, and what I'm getting at here is that when it comes to comics, I tend to think of them as being funny unless I'm reading like a graphic novel or something like that. I tend to think of them as being like hilarious. In XKCD, it alternates between thought-provoking, clever, and funny. Like, you get some of those out of each comic, and so every now and again I'm like, that's clever, you know, but it doesn't bring like the bang funniness enough for me. I do like SMBC. SMBC, I think, is pretty clever a lot of the time and actually manages to have like a solid punchline every single comic. I think XKCD doesn't focus so much on the punchline, but more on like the general thought or like the philosophy of what the comic is trying to convey, whereas SMBC, I think, marries kind of the philosophy of the comic and the message they're trying to deliver, and then they always have a punchline at the end too. And so actually I do like SMBC. The Oatmeal is pretty hilarious too, although the Oatmeal I usually get linked to me on Facebook eventually, so I don't really follow it. It's just eventually if something funny comes out on the Oatmeal, somebody will link it, it'll have like 25 bajillion shares, and I'll just look at it there. Lyrically Yorick asks, hey Splattercat, hello. You ever been asked by friends, family, or coworkers to give their brother, child, nephew, niece a shout out or play some games with them to put on your YouTube channel? If so, how did you respond to it? No, actually, I think most of my friends have pretty good boundaries about stuff like that. Like, I know they want to ask, but I don't think they would because they know it puts me in a really awkward position. In addition, I don't tell people what I do for a living. Like, seriously, I don't tell people that I do this. Like, most of the people, like, on my Facebook, most of the people that I know from back in the day, they have no idea that I do this. They'd be like, so what are you doing right now? And I'll usually give some vague answer about reviewing video games or being, like, a video game journalist or something because, like, I just don't want to explain what it is I do. And so, honestly, most people don't hit me with questions like that because I have purposefully avoided telling people what I do. Like, I don't want them to know how big the channel is on the internet. I don't want them to know that, like, I have this pull that they can then start thinking a little ways for the wheels to turn, like how can they exploit their friendship to like get me to do something with my channel. That's always been a big paranoid thing for me, and from the beginning I've done a lot to try and prevent people from like knowing what I do, or at least like knowing the specifics of it. The people that do know, they don't really know how big it is or how small it is or anything like that. If someone was to ask me, it depends who it was. If it was like my best friend or anything like that, I'd be like, yeah, in a heartbeat. I mean, that's what friends are for. I got in a big argument with one guy on a Let's Play forum one time about, you know, he was upset because his channel was small. And sometimes you find with smaller YouTubers, they're very, very spiteful and just sort of like angry at the fact that like some people make it and some people don't. And I can't explain it. That's just the way the universe works in music and everything else. Some people make it, some people don't. Some people are more talented and never get any, you know, recognition, and some people are less talented and get tons of recognition. It's just the universe. It's RNG. Like, I don't know really what to tell you. And so he had kind of this real spiteful, like, woe is me attitude. And I was just like, he was mad about the fact that some big YouTuber with like 1 million subscribers had helped his friend start a channel and been like, yo, check out my friend's channel. And like overnight, that guy had gotten like 50,000 subscribers and like had a career overnight. And he was really, really upset about it. And I was like, well, man, if you wouldn't do that for your best friend, that seems a little shady to me. I mean, I'd do anything for my best friend. If he needs like a career, screw it, man. He's my best friend. I always say how I take a bullet for my best friend, so it'd be relatively easy for me to just like vouch him on YouTube and be like, yeah, check out my buddy. I don't have that kind of pull. I don't think I could give anybody a career overnight. I doubt that I could even give you maybe 100, 150 subscribers. In all honesty, I'd have run those numbers. You know, when I do those collabs, I talk to all the other people on the collabs and I ask them for the variance in their numbers on the day that it goes live. And honestly, I don't think I have that much pull. I don't think I could help people that much. But like, it depends who's asking. I mean, if it was just somebody that like I knew from high school but haven't talked to ever since, and they're like, hey man, we should totally hook up and blah, I'm like, yeah, that's cool, man. Back burner. But if it's like somebody that I'm really, really close with, of course, I'd do anything for them. Luckily, most of my close friends won't put me in that position because they know it's awkward and they know that it's kind of shady to do so. So I am thankful for that. But in general, it just kind of depends on the person, I think. Luis Ebbison asks, hey, Splat, hey, how's it going? What do you feel about this thing with ISIL and the wave of terrorism and what recently happened in France? Is it even being discussed? Yeah, you know, it's definitely a topic of conversation here in the United States. I think that the modern world is having to deal with a medieval problem when it comes to extremist religion right now, and it's a very, very tricky issue because you're dealing with people who are willing to stoop to extents that we're not willing to stoop to. And so obviously they seem to have sort of an advantage because they'll hide behind civilians. They'll cause massive civilian casualties just to get their message across. And we're not allowed to respond kind in kind due to ethics and morality. And so you're dealing with a group of people that really have no regard for anyone who isn't one of them. It is being discussed. I mean, to the first part of your question, I don't want to get off subject here because it's something like I'd really ramble about. I think that it's a tricky issue. It's a very, very tricky issue, and I'm a simple guy. I don't really have any answers for you. I can't really give you any deep insights or anything like that, but the attack in France has definitely caused some of the bigots to come out. There's definitely been a lot more. I've noticed just on my Facebook alone, there has been a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment. There's been a lot of just angry, general, fearful people just kind of being xenophobic and rambling off. And in all honesty, I understand that reaction. Like, I get it. They're scared, and when you're scared, the first response, you know, in human survival is when you're worried or when you're scared about something, you want to confront the threat, and you just want to be, like, as brutal with it as possible. And it's kind of like, I think some people put their empathy by the wayside in that moment. They kind of abandon it, and they see it as kind of like baggage they don't want to carry with them. But it's definitely being discussed. I think that, I mean, my Facebook and, like, my general social media has been blown up with people that I've known over the years, and it's interesting watching. It's not even really like a discourse, in all honesty. I was going to say it's interesting watching the discourse take place, but it just seems like pockets of people agreeing with each other, and it seems to be in two camps. There's the people that are just like glass the whole thing, kill them all, you know, very, very gung-ho about the whole thing, lock all the immigrants out of the country, put them in camps. I heard that, seriously, no joke. There was a governor here that just said something about putting Syrians in camps or something like that, just like we did with the Japanese in World War II, and I was like, oh man, you're a politician, man. You gotta put a muzzle on that shit. Come on now. Like, you can't have seriously just said, put them in camps? Are you kidding me right now? Come on. I mean, I understand being fearful and xenophobic. Like, I understand why some people have that reaction. But at a certain point, we just got to admit that maybe this thought process has run out its useful course. And you should just be quiet for right now. Just, like, I understand when bad things happen, you want revenge and you feel very bloodthirsty. Believe me, it made me angry when I saw what happened in Paris. And obviously it's a very, very horrible thing, and my thoughts definitely go out to the families of those affected, those who were in the city at the time that things went down. It's a horrible, horrible thing, but I spent a large portion of my younger life being hateful and just being angry about things because I came up after 9/11 happened. That's when I was kind of in my right about to graduate, so, like, you know, halfway through high school type area of my life. And I was very, very hateful during that time period because of what had happened. And so I get it. I get how people's mindset goes to that place. But I'm just not quite ready to give up on empathy yet when bad things happen. I think that when bad things happen, it's more important than ever that you hold on to, you know, those moral and ethical leanings that you have, because that's what's being tested when bad things happen. You're being tested. Like, the universe wants you to become hateful. Or I guess the people that are trying to harm you, they want you to become hateful. They want you to become bloodthirsty and spiteful because that plays into their propaganda hands. If you do your best to maintain kind of a clear mind and still be empathetic towards the people who it's not their fault, while at the same time turning to focus on the threat whose fault it is, I think you can take better ground right there. So anyways, as I said, my thoughts go out to everybody in Paris and in France, obviously. It's a horrible, horrible thing to see things, having grown up with 9/11 and terrorist attacks and stuff like that. It kind of reminds me of, my dad has a friend who's from Belfast. And after 9/11 happened, he said that he came to America, you know, to get away from stuff like that happening. He said it's an absolute shame that it's happening here. And I feel the same way, having, you know, lived through that 9/11 period and watched it on the news the morning that it happened. It's a shame to see other people having to go through the same thing. It really sincerely is. It's a horrible, horrible thing. It's horrible enough to where you really don't even have words to properly describe it or really kind of classify what it is, but I don't know. I hope people hold on to hope, and I hope people hold on to their empathy and they don't give into that bloodthirstiness and that hatred, because I'm seeing a lot of it nowadays, and it's worrying. Original Aussies wants to ask, this is going to be on a lighter tone, or at least a lighter note. What instruments do you play? So, I can play, I'm alright on the ukulele. I'm okay at the piano. I've played that since I was probably 11 or 12. Actually, no, I started playing piano when I was 5 or 6 years old. Never mind. I started playing, my family's very musical. My grandmother my grandmother could have gone to Juilliard, but because her family was poor, she couldn't go. She got accepted, but she couldn't go. And so she spent her entire life just kind of playing piano and guitar as a jazz musician in, like, random groups and stuff like that. So I come from a family of musicians on one side where that's been a passion that she's followed through with her entire life. And so music was very, very important to my mom because it was important to her mom. And so I started playing piano when I was about 5 years old. I can play the drums decently enough. I mean, I'm not amazing at drums, but I can do it. I mean, I've probably spent a couple years worth of time jamming on drum sets, just like in the time that I spent playing music. Guitar is the one that I've spent the most time on, though. I'm okay at piano, I'm okay at ukulele, I'm okay at drums, but guitar is the one that I've slammed a whole lot of time into, like more time than I can really justify. And so that's, I suppose if I had to pick like my spirit instrument, I guess that one would be it. I've always liked it. Ever since the first day I had to earn my first guitar, I saved up. I forget how I earned enough money for it. Like I think we saw, I mean, me and my friends were always running some kind of hustle in the neighborhood, just like random ways to make money. And so anyways, I saved up like $100, $125 and got a Fender Squire, and ever since then it's been all downhill. It's just me been, I usually play about an hour to 2 hours a day. When I was a kid, I used to play 6 or 7 hours a day. I used to play till my fingers bled. My calluses were so thick that they would crack on my fingers and all kinds of crazy stuff. Because that was the thing that I was really passionate about. I wanted to be a musician for a living. Just didn't turn out that way, though. That's how life goes sometimes, and you gotta learn. I know some people that crumple when that happened, and I crumpled for a long time. There's some people that bounce back from it pretty quickly, and they're like, oh, well, that didn't work out. I guess I'll move on to something else while still pursuing it as a hobby. I'm kind of falling into the later camp at this point, although it took me a long time to recover after music fell apart for me, but those are the instruments that I play. The Fox Sin Greed. Do you have ADD? Because you trail off really easily, or maybe it's just a skill that you've developed being a solo YouTuber to keep a conversation going with yourself. You know, honestly, I noticed when I was about halfway through my 20s, I started having a lot of trouble focusing on things, and I still do. Like, I zone out very, very easily, like when people are talking to me or when people are lecturing or talking about anything. I get lost inside my own head, like, all the time. And it happens even, like, when I'm talking to people. I've had it happen when I'm playing inside the middle of an episode for the channel. I don't know if it's ADD or whatever it is. I've never been diagnosed or anything like that. And so, in general, I tend to kind of do a tongue-in-cheek, like, don't mind my ADD type deal. Because I don't really know. Like, I have a lot of trouble focusing on stuff, like I sincerely do. But I don't have problems hyper-focusing on things that I care about. And so it's odd, because if I care about something, I can't focus on anything else. It needs to get done right now, otherwise I get anxious and I can't sleep and it bothers me and it needs to get done. But when it comes to like the little trivial stuff that you go through with every single day, I have the tendency to backburner and ignore that stuff and fail to focus on it properly for huge amounts of time, and it causes all kinds of problems. Like my biggest problem is in social situations. I get lost inside my own head. Like somebody will be talking to me about something and I just like glaze over, and it happens to me all the time, and it's not even like voluntary. Like I'm not doing it on purpose because what they're saying is boring or anything like that. It has nothing to do with the content of what they're talking about. It's just like I get lost inside my own head sometime, and then you'll like have those catchphrases that snap you out of it. They'll be like, you know what I mean? I'm like, huh? You know? And then you'll be like, yeah, I know what you mean. And then you just hope they don't question you about it. Like they'll be like, what did I say? Like, you were talking about the swimming pools? Like he's gotta like make up something. And then it's always wrong. Like you never catch on. You gotta like reroute in your head back to what they talked about originally. And you're trying to piece together like those random fragments that got through while you were lost in your head thinking about Batman fighting Goku or something stupid. It happens to me all the time. Like legitimately, I have trouble. I think it's mostly in social situations, actually. When it comes to work and getting things done, I seem to do okay, and I can focus on important things. But conversationally, I always, like, the second there's any inkling that what somebody's saying is, like, not interesting or just, like, is not immediately pertinent, I'm just like, I just kind of, like, zone out, and then it gets me in so much trouble. I've been fighting really, really hard not to do it lately, but your brain gets in the habit of doing it. That's what I've noticed, is that it's, like, an ingrained thing now for me. And so I have to like mentally fight it from happening. Like when somebody's talking to me, I can feel myself like starting to look around the room and like focus on like a neon light over there or something, being like, huh, that's sort of an interesting shit. And I have to be like, no! And I'm gonna like force myself to go back and be like, don't do that. I'm getting better about it, but man, until I realized it was happening, it caused some major problems for me in life. I think the other half of it is probably due to the fact that just like I know how to monologue. Like, this is something that I've practiced doing since I was, like, 16, 17 years old based on circumstance. And I've always done really, really well with public speaking. I've always done really well just, like, talking to people. And I've always done pretty well when it comes to just keeping, like, a thought process rolling. And then when you add to the fact that I can put editing into the mix and just, like, edit and move things around and be like, nobody even knows that I messed up, it makes it seem like I'm a lot better at something than I actually might be. At the same time, though, just you gotta remember I've been doing this for a very, very long time at this point. I've been doing YouTube for 3 years, but before that I did, you know, random speech classes, public speaking. I was always on stage with the band and stuff like that, and so I just got used to having people and just like kind of addressing large groups and making sure that you aren't like every couple seconds when you're trying to, you know, get your thought process out there. The only way, if you're trying to learn to do that, the only way that I know how to describe it is you've got to practice. I would monologue about anything and everything, and so people are going to look at you funny when you talk to yourself, but I do it constantly. My girlfriend is always walking in on me when I'm like talking to myself, and I'll just sit there and I'll be like, I'll talk about a Sharpie. It's practice. Practice makes perfect, and once you learn to like monologue about any stupid thing laying on your desk or any random building that you drive by, it's odd, because I think it has to do with neural pathways. I'm not a, I don't know anything about brain science or anything like that, but I figure your brain probably gets better at developing speech patterns and preloading the next conversational topic as you go along. Because it seems to me, when I first started, I would always have like these long quiet periods, watch my old videos, where I would be thinking about what I wanted to say next. Whereas now, when I'm saying something to you, I'm already thinking about the next thing that I'm going to say in my head, and it's kind of lining up in a queue, like I've got a mental teleprompter, basically. It's the only way that I really know how to describe what's going on, where my next thought process is already locked and loaded while I'm already talking about the current one. And when you practice enough, I assume you can get to that, because I've heard other people, a lot of YouTubers actually aren't that good at it, but I have seen some other people that I would assume can do the exact same thing, because they seem to monologue like at the same pace and at the same rate that I do without like stumbling over themselves or anything like that. Magic Man's gonna put the cap on this thing with, "Hey, Splats, I have a serious question for you. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop?" Tootsie Roll Pops are kind of a landmine for me. It takes me 0 because I always bite them right off the bat. I like it. Something about the texture. I don't know what it is about the texture of a Tootsie Pop, especially the orange ones. I don't like the chocolate ones. I don't like the blue ones, but I like the red ones and the orange ones. The orange ones are my absolute favorite, though. Orange Tootsie Pops are my jam. And so anyways, I never get around. I don't like sucking on something, though, either. Like leaving something in my mouth and just like sitting there licking it for like an hour. I don't like it. The stick gets all soggy or whatever. I just be like, just bite off a hank right now and get it over with. Because I like the texture of like the squishy chocolate thing in the middle. And then for whatever reason, the type of sugar that they use to coat it with like the hard candy coating, it crumbles easily, and then it coats the Tootsie Roll in the middle so that you've got like that constant like orange or cherry mixed with chocolate flavor. I like it a lot, so usually I just bite it right off the bat because I find it tremendously more enjoyable in terms of texture, flavor, and the combination of flavor by biting it than I do by sitting there and just like sucking on it until you eventually get to the chocolate in the middle, which just kind of feels gross and juvenile to me. I don't like sucking on stuff. It just doesn't, I don't know. I just don't like candies that like sit in your mouth for long periods of time. For some reason, it bothers me. It feels gross for whatever reason. I can't really explain it. That's going to be it for our Q&A today. Every week I do these videos. It's a blast. It's a little bit of catharsis for me at the end of the week, and it's a way for me to interact with all of you and come up with ways to make myself more available to you guys and kind of just like expose my personality, just expose it. But anyways, it's a nice way for me to do that every single week, and honestly, I really enjoy doing these videos. If you want to support the channel, please check out the Patreon. That's the best way that you can directly support what we do here and keep us up and running. I'll have a link for you down below. There are also rewards and fun stuff like that when you do the Patreon, so take a look at those and see if there's lots of ones that are like torture. Like one of them involves me. Well, I'll let you go look and find out. But anyways, some of them are quite torturous, and they give you direct control over my future. And so anyways, if you want to support the channel, that's the way to do it. Otherwise, I'll have all the links down below. Hi, do everybody, and I'll see you next week with the Q&A.